Republicans convene and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials and the Millennial. Joining me today is Garrick Ross.
It's RNC Day.
It's RNC
the first
Day
day of the RNC. There's going to be some magnificent speeches, I'm quite sure. And by that, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be a whirlwind of a week with a lot of bloopers, a lot of highs, a lot of lows, but I'm excited, and I hope you are too, Mark.
I am very excited. Of course, we have with us Christopher Hopkins, our assistant producer, and Adam Katura, our producer. So you think that the RNC is going to be a little more exciting than the DNC convention?
Yeah, so I think one benefit RNC is going to be sort of in person. So there'll be people in the crowd. I did not like the digital format for the conventions. It just felt too much like a B-roll YouTube video where they were just cutting it it was almost like a cheesy PBS production, for your children to watch. It just wasn't good. And then, the speakers I'm not a fan of, for obvious reasons. I thought it was quite interesting.
Seemed very angry.
Yeah,
their convention, not aspirational.
Yeah, it was. The Democrats have one central theme. And it's why they picked Joe Biden to be their nominee, because he doesn't detract from what that central theme is, and it is that they hate Donald Trump.
Yes, they do.
They hate Donald Trump with an ever-burning passion.
Absolutely.
And the convention really exemplified that. I mean, you saw Barack Obama, break. Now, I think it was a stupid precedent. I think George Bush and presidents like that should be going out and defending their legacy. But Obama basically broke an 80-year precedent and went out and actually gave a stunning rebuke of Trump, decrying him and saying he's unfit for office, effectively that he's going to steal an election. And, to me, I mean, that's when you're getting into dangerous territory. You have a former president, weighing into the political arena about the current president and making accusations against his fitness for office, as well as claiming for him to be an authoritarian. That's
says a man who gave $1.5 billion of cash on pallets to the terrorist state of Iran, the Shia state of Iran. He made his choice, right? He chose, out of all of the countries in the Middle East, he chose to reward the one that is the biggest terrorist country probably on planet Earth, namely Iran.
Yeah, the number one state sponsor of
and
terrorism.
Rewarded them with money.
Yeah, because he thought that, dealing with their nuclear program and all, a favoring light was going to lend him credence to the regime.
Yeah, that buying
they would
them.
just suddenly
he
stop.
Could buy them.
They would suddenly stop doing what they do.
I'm going to buy peace. Here's $1.5 billion in cash.
Yeah, and we saw how well that worked out for us.
Yeah, did not work out. So Bill Maher hits the cancel culture really hard, but he does so in a way, in the typical Bill Maher satire approach, which is hysterically funny.
Yes.
And satirizes all kinds of things. We, of course, can't carry all of the clips because it's so much good material, but we have two. And first he talks about Ryan Reynolds the actor.
Yes.
And Ryan Reynolds was married, I guess, a couple of years ago at a plantation down south somewhere. And I don't know or recall the name of the plantation, but I would imagine if you've been down south, and I have, there are plantations everywhere. In fact, most of the land that you step on at one point was part of a plantation.
Yes.
It may have been subdivided 100 times or 1,000 times since then, but nonetheless, the land that you're standing on when you go down south, certainly the Carolinas and elsewhere, guess what? Plantations. So Ryan Reynolds, was married at one. And Bill Maher decides to hit Ryan Reynolds because, and also these idiots who are saying, well, you should never get married at plantation because, they're part of the cancel culture. And Ryan Reynolds found it necessary to apologize. What
Ryan
happened?
Reynolds and his current wife got married at a plantation. I don't know, however many years ago. I don't really follow celebrity love lives.
A few years,
but
not long.
So now that all things that have had bad pasts are now indefinitely bad, this plantation is bad, and so it was a wrong thing for Ryan Reynolds to do. And to avoid being canceled, he preemptively apologized.
That's exactly right. And we have Bill Maher basically making fun of this and demonstrating and explaining why it's so stupid. And we have a clip on that, and here it is.
The stock exchange is 2 blocks from New York's first slave market. And in 1991, construction on a new building in Lower Manhattan unearthed a massive slave burial ground from the 17th century. Among the businesses that stand over that ground today are a dance studio and a ballet academy. So people are literally dancing on those graves. Because America is poltergeist. We're all 6 degrees from genocidal assholes. If we start turning history into a big game of guilt by association, it never ends. Are we really going to make everyone apologize for standing somewhere that humans used to stand when they were even more barbaric than they are now? Ryan Reynolds said of his wedding, "It's something we'll always be deeply unreservedly sorry for. And it was a giant fucking mistake." Yeah, the Green Lantern was a giant fucking mistake.
That was a horrible movie.
You got married at a beautiful venue you saw on Pinterest.
So there you go. Perfect, right? So Ryan Reynolds is like, I'm so sorry. It was a giant blanking mistake that we were married at this plantation. And of course, Bill Maher is saying, wait a minute, just because you stood on that ground, you could stand on Wall Street and large parts of New York, which were slave auction areas. And so does that make you equally guilty that those areas should be canceled and you should be canceled as well? And the answer is no, of course not. Because what matters is today's history, right?
Yeah.
And you learn from the past. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like, I would venture to make a assumption, Mark, that everywhere on planet Earth at some time in history a bad thing has happened. But the only reason you don't care is because you don't know about it.
You don't know
but
about
because something happened in recent history, you cannot doom the land for eternity, for, to be a terrible place. Now, was this plantation an embodiment of very bad things that happened in the 1800s and beforehand? Yes, absolutely. Does it still bear some of those scars? Yes, but that doesn't mean you can't use it for anything. You can't have it doesn't mean you can't have a wedding there. It doesn't mean that the wedding is bad, somehow vile to the memory of the people who were there when all these bad things happened. Similar to his point about the dance studio. I mean, and I thought the best line from that was when he said, you can't hold people to account from a time when they were just so much more barbaric than they were now. I mean, people kind of forget at one time we were dwelling in caves and eating raw meat, Now we are more civilized
and killing each other over the food.
Yeah, and killing each other to survive. It's just to me. It's like grow up with the times. The world we live in is drastically different now than it was 200 years ago, and
yes.
It will be incredibly different 200 years ago. 200 years from now, Mark, I'm sure that there is something that you and I do in our regular day in life that in 200 years from now will be seen as truly just barbaric practice. Like, how could they have done it? Doesn't mean you and I weren't wise people. I mean, we're wise relative to all the people around us.
It's probably something as simple as, oh, you know what they used to do back then? They used to barbecue on a grill, and they would cook like meat from a carcass and then eat it. And that's probably going to be looked at in 200 or 300 years as being incredibly backwards and barbaric.
Yeah.
They eat meat, right? They had to kill something in order to be able to survive.
Yes, so they have their, digitally processed tofu and their spaceships flying around space. I mean,
and I'm not giving that up, okay? I like barbecue, all right? I'm sorry.
I ain't giving up barbecue and meat either.
There's no way.
I would voluntarily be strictly a carnivore.
But it's a great point. It's point's well taken, that in 100 years, could be 50 years, could be 300 years, people are going to look back at today, at what we do, certain things, and say, that is just so ridiculous. And I can only hope in 200 or 300 years, people will not have a repeat of what we're seeing now in the 21st century, namely that we have to cancel any single person or thing just because it doesn't meet perfection.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
And look, I would say in the inherent guise of things, I don't know what the standard will be 200 years from now, but, grilling meat versus, slavery are two very different, very different things. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're mutually equivalent to each other on the scale of bad things, but that doesn't mean that, again, that these standards are something that are feasible because, like he said, you are 6 degrees away from a very bad, event in life, being associated with it. And,
no doubt.
I would hope that nobody cancels the ground that I walk on 200 years from now, just like, I don't think it's feasible to cancel the ground that people walked on 200 or even 2,000 years ago.
And if you achieve something that's truly amazing and truly fantastic, by today's standards, someone in, I don't know, 50, 60 years could tear down the monument of you and say, well, he ate barbecue, so therefore we're going to cancel him. And that's so barbaric compared to today's standards. And that's exactly what is wrong with this, because essentially you're saying you want to wipe out history and not learn from it. Yep. And that's the dumbest thing ever. And that's, by the way, that is uniquely millennial. It is definitely, I'm not saying it's exclusively, okay, I'm being very careful here. It's not exclusively.
Oh, come on.
But
you
it's
boomers,
more uniquely
You boomers
millennial.
got your trousers in a knot when Elvis was shaking his hips on TV, so I don't want to hear it.
I'm sorry, but that was before my time. I'm just saying, Elvis. Oh my God. Jeez. You know, there were two Elvises, the skinny Elvis and the fat Elvis. By the time I came around, it was just the fat Elvis, and I was not a fan.
It's two different. It's two different Elvises, Mark. You remember the one died and the other one escaped. You don't know all those conspiracy theories.
Yeah, L. Ron Hubbard. You know, he's taken up by the spaceship, and then he's somewhere out there.
Ooh, careful, Mark. The Scientologists will be on our ass.
So Bill Maher continues with cancel culture. We have another clip on this, and this is really hysterical, classic Bill Maher, because he basically says in San Francisco, you have protesters. They tore down a statue of General Grant, the guy who was on the winning side of the Civil War, who ended slavery in America, as we know it. And then they also wanted to cancel Honest Abe as well and knock down and deface his statue in San Francisco as well. Well, Maher hits them hard, but he does so in his classic satiric process. Well, here's the clip. You got to listen.
But in San Francisco, protesters tore down one of Grant because Grant was once gifted a slave who he then freed. Okay, not a perfect score, but Grant was the guy who kicked the asses of the other statues you've been tearing down. You know, while they were alive and could fight back. A little braver, I'd say. There's even a drive to remove a statue of Lincoln at the University of Wisconsin because, as one student put it, I just think he did, you know, some good things, but the bad things he's done definitely outweighs them. Yeah, I wish I had been raised with the kind of self-esteem parents give their kids these days, where you can think that when it comes to accomplishments and racial justice, you're just a little bit better than Abraham Lincoln.
That is awesome.
One of the best Bill Maher monologues I've heard in a while.
You're just a little bit better than Lincoln because you were just raised to think that you're just so perfect and wonderful and you're so virtuous.
I could get so 2 points in there. The first thing is I could go on for hours about how great of a person and figure in history Ulysses S. Grant is, and how, you know, modern academia and you know, modern opinions don't do him justice. I mean, at one time, you know, Ulysses S. Grant was one of the top 3 most revered people in the world. I mean, not just domestically, but in the world, like all around the world. Everybody knew who Ulysses S. Grant was. One of the reasons the Lost Cause mythology of the Confederacy really irks me, because they did a great job, great relatively speaking, in tarnishing his name. But you know, if you all have time, go watch the History Channel special that they just did on Ulysses S. Grant. It was a really knowledgeable way of approaching it for somebody. If you don't know who Ulysses S. Grant is, it's a really great place to get a lot of great information, you know, and it's well shot. But anyways, back to Bill Maher, who put it right on the head. Millennials, where we're just a little bit better than Abraham Lincoln. Mark, I am affirmatively way better than Abraham Lincoln. I'm just broad stroke my ego there.
Just a little bit better than Abe. That's why you have to knock down the statue to prove that you're better, right?
It's
not your accomplishments, just the ability to be able to knock down the statue because it can't fight back.
Yeah, I mean, you know, sure, you know, he saved the Union and he freed the slaves and, you know, all that came along with that. And you know.
The broader conversation here, though, from me with Bill Maher is that there are so many, and Joe Rogan talks about this, by the way, there are so many comedians now that are terrified of actually saying jokes and joking about modern society and all the stuff that they would normally joke about, because pretty much everything is off topic. Everything is off the table.
Off limits, yeah. You can't talk about anything.
You can't talk about it, and if you do, you're going to be banned by either the major networks or maybe Netflix or maybe Amazon or maybe everybody. And so Mara is able to hit this in a way that's satirical and super funny without kind of offending, maybe offending everybody on the one hand, but at the same time not doing it in a way that, of course, supports either side all the way.
You know, I find that those comedians, so like I personally respect people who I think are ideologically consistent, regardless of whether I agree or disagree with them. And Bill Maher falls in that category.
He does.
Joe Rogan's another one of those. Like, some of the stuff that comes out of, that he says I don't agree with. But, I respect that he's very consistent and approaches things from the same philosophical manner. But, I also respect that they're not willing to be pushed off of that, I think the best people are the people who everybody hates, in the political arena. So Bill Maher, Bill Maher for most of the time he's bashing conservatism and Trump and all that other stuff.
Absolutely,
that is what it is.
But he's also
bashing all the bad tenets of liberalism that are coming out. I wouldn't even call it
cancel
liberalism.
culture.
I would call it cancel culture and the associated,
because he is a liberal.
The associated mob. He is one of the original neoliberals.
There's no doubt about it. And the thing is the cancel culture, at least he's talking about it, but the comedians, as a general principle, they're terrified to talk about anything. And by the way, I'm one of those guys that loves to laugh.
Yeah,
so
I can laugh at myself.
I'm laughing at myself. Bill Maher, of course, I'll listen to him when he makes fun of conservatives, and
I still find it funny.
It's still funny, and sometimes it makes you upset, but it's still funny.
Yeah.
And that's what comedy is supposed to challenge everything that you think and about and everything that you believe, and then laugh at yourself, as you said. That's a critical thing to do. But I feel as though millennials can't do that. I feel like they're terrified.
Because Bill Maher or Joe Rogan will cut like a monologue like this, or they'll have a guest on their show who espouses views similar to this, and then we freak out, Mark. We lose our minds.
I have a number of good friends, and they'll joke to me frequently about elected officials. This, you know how politicians are, and blah blah blah. I think that's hysterically funny. Yeah. Because so much of it is true, and of course, because so much of it is true of the whole doesn't mean it's true of the individual. But it still doesn't matter. It's still funny. Yeah. And the entire time that these jokes are being made, they're being made at my expense and others, and I'm laughing at myself, which I love to do, by the way. Yeah. Just saying.
Because you're not uptight, and because you realize that, it's just the way the world works.
It is. It's not perfect, and I'm not perfect. So the New Jersey gym that defied the order. The New Jersey gym has made national news.
Yes.
Because it has defied the order to basically close indefinitely.
There's nothing they can do.
And so the New Jersey gym has always remained open, and they said, well, we're going to remove half of our equipment, which they did. And then the state of New Jersey said no. So then they moved all the equipment outside. And the state of New Jersey said, well, you can't do that either, which of course is stupid. And then, so how do you stay in business? If you're a gym, you got to pay rent, you have to pay your employees, you have to, at a minimum, you have fixed costs that you have to cover, so you're going to be out of business in no time flat. So this gym basically has defied all the orders, and finally, the state decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to pull your license to do business. So the state pulled their license and said, guess what? You don't even exist now, because we have pulled that's what, of course, a Stalinist society does, but that's what the governor of New Jersey and the AG of New Jersey decided to do, and the various health departments in New Jersey. So the gym owners, here's what they did. They decided to reopen their location as a headquarters for a GOP candidate challenging Senator Cory Booker. So the gym will serve as a campaign headquarters and rally spot for Republican U.S. candidate Rick Mehta, a pharmacist who is challenging Senator Cory Booker. So the idea is you walk in, it's a campaign headquarters, and you can also work out while you're there.
Nice.
Pretty clever, huh?
Yeah, it's smart. For $15.99 a month, you can come and hang out at Rick Mehta's campaign headquarters. And we also happen to have some gym workouts. So, politics and a pump. What more do you need?
Politics and a pump. I just thought it was a brilliant idea.
Never get between Guidos and their gym, Mark.
Oh, I'm not touching that one.
The New Jersey Shore.
Yeah, well, you can say that because you're from Jersey.
Mark, so you know that show, The Jersey Shore?
Of course.
With Snooki and all that?
Yeah, Snooki. They've all been arrested.
I grew up in that town. I I can drive across the bridge and there's the shore house, and I've walked the boardwalk. I've been to DJs and all those lovely places. Like, it is a cultural enigma on its own, and it is. When I say that, like, there's a little. I'm educating all you boomer podcast listeners right now. So,
Indeed.
So pay close attention, get out a notepad, and write it all down. There's a tenant in the show that they all live by. It's called Gym Tan Laundry, and I'm telling you, it's true. I mean, I don't know how a lot of these, how are you going to work out?
So what's the tenant?
Gym Tan Laundry.
Oh, so gym is the first priority.
Gym priority 1.
And then you get a tan.
That's how you got to get bronze.
And then you do your laundry.
Then you got to do your laundry so you look good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gym Tan Laundry.
Gym Tan Laundry.
That's the Jersey sort. Yes, I did learn something.
Sure. Culture at its finest. But, I mean, so my big gripe here is with Philip D. Murphy, governor of New Jersey, because he does have a very authoritarian approach to enforcement. One of my biggest complaints with how COVID is turned out from a political perspective is that it is very arbitrary and capricious, is very authoritarian, whereas, they issue these edicts, these rules, executive orders, you name it, telling businesses that they have to be closed for X number of periods of time, and that they will give them no resources to effectively stay open during that time. I mean, so, this gym, he presumably has tens of thousands of dollars in insurance and rent payments that he has to pay every month because
no matter what,
renting a big warehouse, and he's got to fit all of his stuff, et cetera, and not to mention employees' fees, payroll taxes, all these, externalities that come with owning a gym that are fixed costs monthly. COVID happens and Phil Murphy wakes up one morning and he says, all right, you got to close down. And then the gym owners are like, all right, cool, but how are you going to help me? And Phil says, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to, and this is a synonym for every state in the union who I predominantly view to be run by, progressive governors of the same, viewpoints. And they say, well, here's, I don't know, X number of millions of dollars in funds that you can apply for. And by the way, the odds of you getting any of that and it being enough to sustain you for the 5 months we've been in lockdown are minimum at best. You can apply for the SBA loans, but I mean, anybody who's paid
there
attention knows that there's strings attached. Who knows, if you're even going to get, the approved for them, how much money they'll give you. The payroll protection program, they had to resupplement that bill twice because it ran out of money. The amount of aid that has been out there for a lot of these business owners has been nothing.
You started out not depending on the government. That's why you're self-employed. And then next thing you know, because of COVID, government makes you dependent on government.
Yeah. And so they're just these governments are operating from the perspective that somehow everybody will make it through and it's fine. And they're okay with people losing their businesses. And it's stunning to me because the death rate or the number of deaths daily in New Jersey is like in the decimal places. It's less than 1. It's like slightly greater than 0. So effectively, it is 0. And yet they've maintained this strict lockdown that is overbearing, overburdensome, and have offered no reprieve to these people. I mean, you look at some of these states, like here in Maryland, I've been going to the gym, and I wear a mask, and I wipe down the equipment after me, and there's not like 200 people in there elbow to elbow, breathing in down each other's throats, giving each other COVID. I mean, the idea
makes you wonder how they make it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they're not making it.
They're not. I mean, they're struggling to keep, especially the entertainment,
Sure.
all these spaces. They're not doing well, and it seems to me that nobody really cares because COVID is just this hyped up to be this existential threat. Like, I mean, literally an existential threat. I mean, like, if you looked at just the raw data about how many, what the death rates are compared to the infection rates, the death rates continue to decline every day. And yet here as we know more about it and we create better therapeutics, it is not going to end life as we know it. Civilization as we know it. But a lot of these governors are using this because the Democrats' motto is don't let a good crisis go to waste.
And stay more control you can centralize, the more power you have, of course.
Yes.
So listen to this, podcast listeners. We're going to talk about vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris. She was recently nominated at the DNC, and apparently
overshadowed by Obama. I thought that was a big mistake. They put her as the final speaker of the night, and then they put Obama right before her. And Obama, look, I may not agree with anything that comes out of his mouth, with respect to policy or his view of politics or how the world works. But man, that guy can lay down a speech.
Oh, absolutely.
He can captivate a room, and he is very well articulated. He's one of the best speakers, I feel like,
He's very
modern
articulate.
politics.
No doubt
and they
about
put
it.
her up after him, and she was a dud.
So the Wall Street Journal has this great article about Kamala, and it's entitled, "What Kamala Harris Isn't Saying About Her Mother's Background." So Kamala Harris, you have to read this article, it's in the Wall Street Journal. Kamala Harris's mother is from southern India.
Yes.
And the Tamil population there is the dominant population in southern India. And her mother was part of the Tamil Brahmin population, which were the upper crust of the Tamil population.
So
they call
India
them,
still has a caste system, for many of you who don't know what Mark means by the Brahm, the word he used. So
Brahmins.
effectively, you are born into a class in society, and you stay there. And there is no upward or downward mobility. It just is fixed.
That's exactly
and
right.
they're, I think, the last country in the civilized world who has it, but they still have it.
And so that's very true. And so the Tamil Brahmins, of course, focused on education,
Yes.
which is why they were able to advance in southern India. And they also advanced because they stuck together, and they really were hyper-focused on all things about learning, and even attached themselves to the British when they were colonized to learn as much as they could about Western civilization and education and so forth. And so as a result of that, they became very advanced much faster than everyone else. And, they already were focused on education as it is. So the WSJ, Wall Street Journal, goes on to say, but the Tamil Brahmin story also undercuts many of the pieties of the U.S. left. And the journal goes on to say, well, how do you characterize America as a land of oppression when so many immigrants have clearly experienced it as a land of opportunity, such as Kamala's mother?
Yes.
And the Indian policies that spurred the Tamil Brahmin exodus, so the Tamil Brahmins left India, and they wanted to leave India because of the fact that they were a minority. And so their migration...
And were relegated to that existence for as long as they lived in India.
Their
There was nothing they could ever have
Their
done about it.
migration offers a cautionary tale. Socialism, adopted at independence in 1947, created so few jobs that within 2 decades, educated Indians began streaming to the West. Even today, the middle-class dream of many Indians begins with emigrating. And to this, the pitfalls of identity politics, beginning in the 20th century, anti-Brahmanism became a hallmark of Tamil politics, because the Tamil Brahmins, of course, were a minority within the Tamil minority population in India. Numerically, larger castes, Brahmins, accounted for only 2.5% of the population, mobilized on the basis of group identity. In the 1960s, they introduced sweeping quotas in education and government employment that forced many Tamil Brahmins to seek opportunities elsewhere, including, of course, Kamala's mother, who came to the United States for opportunity because identity politics and socialism were basically forcing her away from India. She comes to the United States and she goes to Berkeley. Her mother goes to Berkeley.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing. First of all, it's very admirable that her mother focused on education when she came here. But this idea that somehow Kamala Harris is part of a class of citizens of the United States that has somehow been wronged is BS. And that's what the WSJ is coming at, in addition to the fact that, how do you come to the United States and characterize America as a land of oppression when you came here and you found nothing but opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really understand the point that the Wall Street Journal is getting at here, whereas, one of the major parties in the United States is effectively claiming the American dream is dead, that this country is, for intents and purposes, much to a degree, a failed state in how it handles, minority populations and just our general way of life. It's just this rabid, oppressive state that makes it so, nobody can ever excel. And when you look at, the sheer desire that a lot of immigrants have in coming to the United States, it just greatly undermines that argument from Democrats that, if this place is so bad, why is it still like the number one place for people to emigrate to, for opportunity, jobs, success, financial success, educational success, to raise your family? I mean, it is still the most enticing place to move to and build your life.
And there is enormous hypocrisy, per the WSJ article, of a candidate such as Kamala,
who would cast it in this way when she herself has been, and her family has been, a great benefactor of the system that we have here.
I mean, think about it. Her mother is an immigrant.
And she
her
went to
father
Berkeley.
is an immigrant. Kamala was born here.
And she is now the vice presidential nominee for a major party.
Precisely.
Look,
precisely.
in America,
and somehow she's a victim?
Yeah.
I think not.
Yeah, my favorite one-liner for this is the Meghan Markle woman who is the Princess of England or Duchess of Sussex or something.
Yes.
And so I say
she's an American and she married Harry.
The American dream is so well alive, you can truly be anything, even an English princess.
Yeah,
I mean,
great point.
Welcome to the U.S. You can do anything you want, including it being a
And no
princess.
sooner did she do that than she hates on America while she's over in England.
Yeah, that's a whole new fire, and that's
it's
really
just so
been lit
stupid.
up.
It's so ignorant.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah.
And Kamala, of course, I know that Kamala knows better. And I think most people
part of her
realize
political
this,
opportunism.
but it's pure opportunism.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean, she thinks that, a majority of people in the voting demographic that she's shooting for sympathizes with this opinion, woke millennial liberals, because she is cut from the progressive cloth of the party because, she rightfully, well, not rightfully, but she has, parroted a lot of those opinions because it makes her more applicable to a national audience of progressives as opposed to when she was running for Senate or district attorney. She was the law and order candidate. And then, no sooner is she the nominee for, or running a presidential
campaign. She's the pro-riot candidate now.
Yeah, now she's pro-riots. She was smoking weed, listening to Snoop Dogg and Tupac.
And then putting people away for doing the same thing.
Yeah,
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Sheer political opportunism. Whichever
Absolutely.
way the wind blows, she's floating in it.
And that's exactly what you don't want in a civil society, is someone who's going to change. They don't really have any core
Just
values.
capitulate to popular opinion,
Absolutely. And unfortunately, that's what so many politicians do, which is, of course, why they get the rap that is probably so well-deserved in so many cases. So this reminds me, of course, we're hitting on Kamala, but it reminds me of Biden because Kamala, of course, her mom was born in India, in southern India. And Biden,
I'm sure Biden's got a clip.
there's a clip, all right.
Always got his foot in his mouth.
In 2006, Biden was running for president in 2006. And interestingly enough, 2006 he was running for president, right, before he was chosen by Obama.
That was 2008.
No, but Obama was running in 2008, but I think Biden started out running as president until he was chosen.
That's right. It's in the primaries. Yeah.
So in 2006, when Biden was not yet chosen as the Veep under Obama, Biden was running in earnest for president for, I think, the third time. And interestingly enough, he, on the campaign trail, made an incredible racial slur against Indian Americans. And we have a clip on that. And we're playing this clip because isn't it ironic that he's chosen in an Indian American?
I mean, there's a lot of ironies in his pick of her. I'll say that. And we've covered a lot of them, but I'm sure this one is just another one on a long list.
We have a clip on that, and here it is.
Great relationship. In Delaware, the largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking. Oh, gigantic.
Can you imagine?
No, I'm not joking, says Joe.
Can you imagine if a Republican ever said something like this,
page of the New York
and
Times.
then had the gall to then run for president and then choose an Indian American as his running mate, and think that that would not come back to haunt him to the point where, especially in the era of cancel culture, why doesn't cancel culture apply to him when it comes to this?
Because he is the cancel culture's champion, Mark. Because again, Donald Trump is so terrible and so existentially threatening because, God forbid, he'll steal the election, Mark, and if he loses, he won't leave the White House. He just won't leave. But this is their view on him. But Biden is the champion of the Democratic Party right now.
So cancel culture works it applies to all others. But if you're the woke candidate, cancel culture doesn't apply to you.
Yeah, liberty for me, but not for thee.
It's just crazy. I mean, I don't understand it. I don't understand why this hasn't been played again and again.
Well, because this goes back to my other gripe with this campaign season is nobody's been able to ask Joe Biden a serious question because
he's hiding.
He lives in his basement. They trot him out for a 40-minute teleprompted speech. They cut the questions, kick the reporters out, and then they ship him right back into his basement. It's been like he's been like the least accessible. He has been so inaccessible that even Brian Stelter on reliable sources and CNN said, shouldn't Joe Biden do an interview at some point? It's bad when even Brian Stelter, who is the heavyweight of the Democratic Party on CNN, is saying you probably...
Very deep thinker.
Very deep thinker, yes. Very, very nonpartisan journalism, doing very great journalism things.
Deep thoughts from Brian Stelter.
Deep thoughts. Brian Stelter. Oh, horrible. But anyways, like if he's even saying it, you notice something.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy stuff. So at the Democrat National Convention, by the way, it drives me crazy when they call it the Democratic.
No, they're the Democrat Party.
It's the Democrat National Convention. Even the Wall Street Journal got that wrong. At the Democrat National Convention, Hillary Clinton, she had a little I guess it was taped. I don't think it was live. Or was it live when she read it?
I don't know. A lot of people had taped speeches. I know Michelle Obama's was taped.
No doubt that was taped, exactly. I think Obama's was taped too.
Yeah.
Because naturally they can edit it in advance, which is why they love this era of COVID.
Or they can make sure it wasn't terrible.
True. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the great thing about taping. So Hillary, of course, she's front and center at the DNC, and she talks about Donald Trump.
So what you're telling me is this wasn't a Hillary Clinton speech, this was a Hillary Clinton therapy session.
It was a therapy session. She's endorsing, of course, Joe Biden, and she naturally can't help but talk about her election. And she's projecting on what the Democrats, I think, are going to try to do themselves. But the fact that anybody who is as high up as Hillary Clinton would say this, to me, it demonstrates that there's going to be unrest after this election if Donald Trump wins.
I think no matter who, no matter what happens, it is going to be quite the contentious time.
Well, we have that clip, so let's listen to the clip first, then we'll talk about it. Here is good old Hillary.
Vote for honest elections so we, not a foreign adversary, choose our president. Vote for the diverse, hopeful America we saw in last night's roll call. And don't forget, Joe and Kamala can win by 3 million votes and still lose. Take it from me. So we need numbers overwhelming so Trump can't sneak or steal his way to victory.
There you go. She says we need numbers that are so overwhelming so that Trump can't sneak, whatever that means, or steal, we know what that means, the election again. Now they're actually saying it. They're trying to, the Democrats, who lied for 3+ years about Russians colluding with Trump and Trump colluding with Russians to steal the 2016 election. Now they're saying, even though that this has all been proven wrong, now the Democrats are saying, well, Trump is going to steal the election again. This is how unrest, civil unrest, which could turn into really hot civil war unrest stuff, can occur when you have elected officials, who are formerly elected officials, but also high-level government officials, such as Hillary Clinton,
presidential nominae,
say this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's really that's really the dangerous line. You can talk about all the bad merits of, or what you view as the bad merits of Trump's policies, and make this a binary choice in character in terms of who's a nicer person. That's what conventions are about. But when you're talking about how one candidate is clearly going to be the downfall of America. It's quite dangerous, especially when it comes to things like stealing an election, where you're basically saying so the theme is Republicans do voter suppression, so they're going to steal your vote, and then also illegitimate governments are going to pick your next president. I mean, there's basically the recipe for uprising. And, I mean, I could complain about, how obviously to the Chinese and to the Iranians and North Koreans, Joe Biden is their guy, and that's what all the intel reports say. But, I think the bigger conversation should really be about how there shouldn't be room for that in politics.
Should be policy. They should be talking about policy and giving specifics about policy, but she never did. All Hillary did was talk about these platitudes that, he's going to steal the election again, or he's going to sneak,
to me, it's crazy. Like, he didn't, as much as you may or may not like him, I can't sit here and come to the conclusion he stole anything. Hillary Clinton ran probably the worst presidential campaign of the last 20 years. I mean, her inability to go to swing states, her reliance on terrible information and terrible data just was astounding. And, I would make the bold assertion that she was, also people just don't like Hillary Clinton. But that's beside the point,
Well, she talked about empathy, too, during the speech. We didn't play that clip.
She has none of that.
And the interesting thing is that she doesn't have empathy, and she doesn't show empathy. And had she done so, I think she would have easily beaten Trump. In fact, in the exit polls, when Barack Obama was running against Mitt Romney, the exit polls showed that people voted for Obama to re-elect him because they thought he had more empathy than Mitt Romney, which was certainly understandable because Mitt Romney comes off as a cold fish.
Yeah.
And so Trump has to be very careful about that, because during the entire DNC, all the speakers, including the media, kept using the word empathy.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Like, you mentioned it with the Obama-Romney thing. People will vote. People will not like your policies, but they'll vote for you because they think that you're a nice person, or they can drink a beer with you, or that you're cool, or any of those other things. Like, there's a reason why the House and the Senate drastically flipped Republican when Obama was president, because when it came to actual substantive policy, people really didn't like, the phone and pen legislating that he did, through EOs and regulatory bodies. But,
they liked Obama,
they liked
but not
him
his
as
policies.
a person. Yeah. So Trump's got to be careful. Like, they can like your policies. They think that, what you're doing for the economy was good and that their 401ks have never been better. But if they don't like you, they're not going to vote for you.
They're not going to vote for you.
And this is what the polling has showed, where it's like when they sample the people who are voting, who are like confirmed voting for Biden, it's like 57% of those people are voting for Joe Biden because he's not Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. It's not that he is running on some great platform, or that they like his experience, or they like the guy, or anything like that. He's just not.
It's just not the Donald.
Just not the Donald.
Interesting. And then Hillary goes on the MSNBC show, with Rachel, Joy, and Nicole, the three woke women of MSNBC. And Hillary, this is also this week, says that Republicans have bowed to Trump. It's like they had a lobotomy or something. Tell me if this doesn't sound familiar from the 2016 campaign. Well, there she is again. They got her out there, good old Hillary. And this is right after the DNC convention speech. We have a clip on that as well, and here she is.
And you have a lot of good legislation that has come out of the House under Nancy Pelosi that goes to the Senate and is just basically buried by Mitch McConnell. I don't understand what has happened to the people that I served with, I worked with, I traveled with, who literally seem to have had like a lobotomy or something. They just have given up their principles, their values, their backbone to following Trump, regardless of where he leads, which they know, and I believe they know, is unconstitutional, often illegal, reckless, wrong, whatever adjective you want to use.
Ah, yes, the basket of deplorables. That's what this reminds me of in 2016. Except that this time, Hillary, is saying, well, they're bowing to Trump and it's like they had a lobotomy or something. Once again, the idea that the deplorables, people that support Trump, are too stupid and they're not as smart as her.
That speech was the embodiment of the reason she lost in 2016.
Exactly.
I am honestly surprised they put her out on stage again.
Dumb, wasn't it?
Even more surprised they put her husband out. But if turn over a new leaf, for goodness sakes. She is not the answer to any of your political problems.
Not even close.
Not even close. She is the Democrats view Donald Trump as the biggest problem, and Hillary Clinton is the reason for that problem.
Absolutely.
So, good luck, Hillary Clinton, and all the things you're doing. But
and last week,
please stop lecturing us all.
Well said. Last week we compared and contrasted people at the Democrat convention and the Republicans that are likely to speak, and we're going to do that again because that was Hillary that you heard. And now the Republicans are going to have Kimberly Klacik, who put out...
At the RNC, congratulations
At the RNC. Way to go, Kimberly. And Kimberly is the person who put out her own ad, produced her own ad, and did nothing but just show what the city of Baltimore currently looks like, its condition. And the fact that for 53 unabated years, Democrats have been in control of every single aspect and lever of power of the city of Baltimore. And Kimberly is a black Republican who's running for Congress in Baltimore. And we have a clip from her ad, and talk about comparing contrast to good old Hillary and the DNC. Here's a preview of Kimberly Klacik. Here's the clip.
The Democrat Party have betrayed the black people of Baltimore. If the politicians walk the streets like I do, they would see exactly how their policies and corruption affects us. But they don't want to see it. They don't want you to see this. Go to any Baltimore neighborhood and ask this question. Do you want to defund the police?
No.
No.
Absolutely not.
I had 3 sons killed in Baltimore City. And I think if we defund the police officer, it's going to be worse than that. So no, I'm opposed to that.
What are you going to defund the police for? Why? How do you defend your city, your community? Families are losing people.
It's not just Baltimore. The worst place for a black person to live in America is a Democrat-controlled city. It's 2020. Name a blue city where black people's lives have gotten better. Try. I'll wait.
So interestingly enough, I want to get podcast listeners to focus on this, namely that Kimberly is talking about policy and the impact of policies, good and bad, on places like Baltimore. And what you heard previous to that was Hillary Clinton just whining, and I'm going to say it, whining about the fact that she lost because someone cheated and stole an election from her, and that's why you have to vote him out. Never talking about policy whatsoever. And I think this is a huge mistake by the DNC to completely and utterly ignore policy and policy prescriptions.
They don't have anything. I mean, so one of the things that has been very evident, like you said, is that they don't have a policy platform to go on. I mean, you have the Biden-Bernie memorandum policy thing, but, Biden can say he's going to work with Bernie and, all those things happen, but they really only have one uniting thing. And that is their deep hatred for Donald Trump. And, other than that, substantive policy-wise, they have nothing because there is a huge chasm in the Democratic Party. And no amount of, presidential memorandums can ever, smooth those policy differences because Biden and Bernie Sanders, I do not think, look at any issue from the same shoes. And so, they trotted out their best cast of anti-Trumpers, including some of our famous never-Trump Republicans. I always thought it's great to see John Kasich in good health again.
Yeah, and Jeff Flake's out there too.
Flake,
what a perfect name for an anti-Trumper. He's a flake.
Jeff Flake.
It's
Yes.
like a Republican who's a flake. He's a total flake.
Yeah.
So if you were to give Kimberly Klacik advice about her yet-to-be-given RNC speech, what would the advice be? What kind of speech should it be? What should she cover?
So one of the things that I want to see from the Republican Party is this emphasis on big tent, big tent policies and things like that. What I mean by that is that this party should be a big tent for people of very different walks of life to find things that make their lives better. And part of that is bringing people into the tent. We talked about it last podcast that the Republican Party has a very deep systemic issue in how it approaches people in the cities, and winning over those votes and trying to make substantive policy changes in the cities. It's one thing to be the governor of a state that has major cities in it, but it's another thing to be the mayor of the city and actually affect local substantive policy.
So the Republican Party is doing that because they're getting her to speak. So what do you think they should advise her to say?
She should be the voice of, for those policies. I mean, how can we affect change for the cities? Like, how can we make, cities' lives better? I liked the ad because it drew the comparison between, how these cities are burning, but I'd like to see her make an emphasis on how we can bring them into the fold. Not just that it's okay to vote different, but why should we vote different?
What will change?
What are we offering?
What will
change? What
if
will
you
do?
Vote a different way?
Yeah, because like you said, you're not hearing any of that from the other convention. It's simply that we have...
Well, Trump's message in 2016 is, what do you have to lose? And it did resonate with a lot of Americans, but it did not resonate with the inner cities where you have primarily majority black populations.
I understood his appeal. I thought the appeal shouldn't have been, what do you have to lose? It should have been, what do you have to gain? And that's what I want from Kimberly, and like Tim Scott, all these different people from different walks of life, regardless of, whether they're a minority or not. What do you have to gain?
Interesting.
Is your life before the pandemic better off than it was 4 years ago? If not, how can we make it better?
I would just ask her to talk about what she mentioned in her video commercial, which is that Baltimore has been in control by the Democrats at every level of government, and that things have just continuously gotten worse, and their solutions always make things worse, and they keep people in this constant state of despair. And there are solutions, and then for Kimberly Klacik to lay out what those 3 key solutions would be and how that would be different from what's being done now, I think that's important, because I do think that there are a lot of Americans who are very confused this election, particularly people that are in cities who have had to move out because of COVID, because they've lost business opportunities or they've lost the opportunity to live safely in the city. And I think they're looking for someone to vote for.
Yeah. I also think, it's important, like I said, with that big tent, and Kimberly can really be somebody who can bring people into it, because there's a glaring long-term problem that the Republican Party has, and it is millennials.
Huge problem. I agree.
There is no sympathy for the Republican Party.
Thus marking the millennials. So we can learn more about what they're thinking and why.
And how you should appeal to their policy preferences.
And don't insult them. We know that. That's a big mistake.
They are going to be the majority of the population. They're going to be the boomers of a certain generation, and you're going to have to live with, I think, 65, 70%, liberals in there, and that is an absurd number in terms of, one political ideology in a generation.
Absolutely. And we can only hope that, we leave them a country, and that they, take over a country then that they can hopefully make better.
Yeah.
So next up, we have the dumbest bill in America. It's the dumbest bill in America. Do we have a lead up, Mr. Assistant Producer? Of course. Here it is. Dum 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 dum. And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it's from Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, who says that she wants to require waiters to wear dog cones. So you ever see the movie Up, where the dog is the dogs in the movie Up? A couple of them are wearing the cone of shame, is what they called it. It's a great movie.
So they don't, start scratching or biting after they got their junk snipped.
Or if they have something wrong with their foot, they don't try to chew their foot, and it's too difficult to do that.
I like my example better.
Okay. So Governor Janet Mills, to be fair, this is not an actual bill, because she could do things by executive order, because she has these emergency powers like every other governor does in America at the moment because of COVID. And she had the gall to say and to tweet out that, maybe those cone things, people should wear them that are waiters, because they actually point up, so that when you're waiting on people and giving them food, if you happen to cough or if you happen to talk, anything that's coming out of your mouth is going upward as opposed to downward at the food when you're serving it. That was her reason. So in other words, she came up with this great scientific idea herself. So in other words, waiters are going to be dogs wearing dog cones in Maine,
very
potentially.
Impractical. You know, expectations versus reality. Everybody's standing upright and they cough and it just magically flies into the air. In reality, they got to bend over. They got to put things on the table, Mark. They're going to be in your food's face, whether you like it or not.
Or when they bend over, the cone hits you in the head when they bend over. So.
Yeah. Not to mention, it just looks ridiculous.
It looks so
It's
stupid.
Just, can you imagine?
It looks stupid when a dog's wearing it.
Human beings walking around in a human cone. That has got to be a work hazard. I do not think that anything good will ever come from that.
I think some restaurants should implement that just for the heck of it because it would be so funny
I'm
to
sure
watch.
it's going to be like a niche restaurant thing. You know how you go to like some of those restaurants and they have like funny experiences, like they make fun of you or make you wear stupid hats with drawing on it. It's going to be like, come to this restaurant. We have cones on all our waitresses' heads.
I mean, I was at a restaurant recently where they were wearing an entire face shield. So the face shield, of course, it started on their head and the shield completely, so they weren't wearing a mask, it was just a face shield. And the face shield completely covered, so they looked like they were from the movie Lost in Space or the show Lost in Space.
I was gonna say, I've been to the store and I've seen people who are wearing like, they almost look like spacesuits. And I'm just like, oh, that's really intense right there. I was like, you know, they look like they got the full domed in head. I was like, you know, one small step for man, one giant leap for COVID kind.
And I can kind of understand a little bit because my understanding is that COVID can be transmitted into your eyes as well.
That was new to me. That's a little freaky.
That is freaky. So I guess the entire face shield thing makes sense, but it was concerning that someone bringing your food was wearing this on the one hand because you're thinking to yourself, why am I out eating to begin with? That's what that guy has to wear.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, right?
Yeah. I think we've all assumed the risk. That's why I'm here.
So what are your final thoughts on good old Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, talking about requiring, she hasn't actually done it yet, but suggesting that waiters should be required to wear these dog cones?
How are we going to enforce that, Mark? Are we going to call the dog pound on them if they don't wear it? You're going to have to go take them to the rescue?
I think that when you wait on tables and you're wearing a dog cone, you should have to have a dog with you walking along also wearing a dog cone. I think that'd be
for effect. It's like those cat cafes, except with dogs, Mark. Come get a T-bone and pet some dogs.
And that's it. That's the dumbest bill in America. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our millennial, Garrick Ross, and of course our producer, Adam Coutura, and our assistant producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and our website. See you next time.